Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Project Aware and Healthy Transitions webinar, and the third in this series of the Social Marketing Community of Practice, entitled The Art of Evaluating Social Marketing. With all of our webinars and office hour sessions, we do have to post a disclaimer that the views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. As you can see, and most of you are probably aware of, SAMHSA does have the two initiatives, the Healthy Transitions and Project Aware initiatives. The main purposes of these are making schools safer, increasing access to mental health services, and promoting resilience and equity in communities. This particular webinar is covering both of these initiatives, so we definitely like to welcome everybody from across the board today.
Welcome everyone again to this webinar series. I just wanted to give a little bit of background to this particular series that you all are on. This webinar is called The Art of Evaluating Social Marketing, and it's the third of 4 webinars that we are doing this year. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. We're really excited about this topic and having Thomas and Brian here, who are just experts in their field on social marketing. So we're super excited to have them here, and I'm now just going to pass it on to Thomas and Brian to introduce themselves and lead us through their material.
Woohoo! All right, everybody. My name is Thomas Houston III. I am the Poverty Center lead at Medici Road, where we really seek to reduce generational poverty. And one of the things that we focus on is what we're here to talk about today, which is evaluating programs so that we know what works and what doesn't work. It's going to be very high energy today, and I'm going to let Brian introduce himself so you can kind of get a little bit of a feel for what him and Ghost do as well, and then we can jump right in.
So hi everyone, this is Brian Barnes, and I am the principal of Ghost, and I'm going to share today some of the efforts that we're doing in Oklahoma with our Now It's Time communities and share some of the results that we're seeing. I'm looking forward to our time together.
Let's just jump right in. We're going to have 3 main overall objectives for today's conversation. And we say conversation because we really want you to be able to ask any questions that you have around evaluation. So the first objective is to discuss why evaluating social marketing is so important. The second one is to identify social marketing evaluation strategies. And the third one is for us to create talking points for you to be able to have with your evaluation team. So as Amanda alluded to a little bit earlier, we're really into the third step or third piece of the puzzle, if you will. We started off with talking about the campaign. What does it mean to actually develop this initial social marketing campaign? We moved on to have a conversation around the target market and making sure we're talking to the right people. And now we're going to have a pretty in-depth conversation around evaluation. And the whole reason you do evaluation is just to be able to understand if what you're doing is working or not. Now, we're actually going to do a quick poll, so for people who are online, you can kind of answer this question in the chat box. Where do you consider yourselves, where do you see yourselves when it comes to evaluating social marketing? Do you see yourselves as a beginner, so where you're actually only evaluating the programming? Do you consider yourselves intermediate, where you're evaluating the program, but you're also starting to take a look at what pieces of social media work? Or do you consider yourselves advanced or experts where you're evaluating everything, the programs and overall social marketing? Let's talk about why is evaluation important, which is really the crux of today's conversation amongst the team. So I really look at it as 3 overall reasons of why you want to actually prioritize evaluation. So if you look at the first one is this whole idea around we all do the work because we're seeking to affect some kind of behavior change. And so we oftentimes will have conversations with our friends and they'll say, do you enjoy what you do? And most of us will say yes. They'll continue to ask us questions, but my hope is that if they ask the question, is what you're doing working, you should be able to answer that question. So that's where evaluation becomes important because you want to know, is what you're doing working? Also, you want to, at some point, increase program participation. well, how do you know what are the key points you want to talk about? If you're not evaluating your communication, it'll be hard to know like key pieces to use and sell people on, and so that's where you want to do the evaluation as well. And the last one is, I know all of us do this work, and we would do it for free if there was no such thing as bills. But in general, the way things typically work is that for us to continue to do the work, somebody has to pay for it. And it becomes very difficult to ask or secure additional funding if we can't let people know if this work is working. And so when you start talking about different ways to communicate, different ways to do social marketing, we need to be able to say that it's working or it's not working, make adjustments so we can continue to ask for more funding. And so evaluation becomes very important for all three of these points. Now, I know we often talk, I think it's about 25% of you all said you actually started to evaluate social media. And to be honest, only up until about a year ago, the words social media and social marketing were interchangeable. And we're now getting to the point where people are starting to see the differences. Where we recognize there's a difference, we should be evaluating them. And so just recognizing that if you're only evaluating social media, it's going to cause you to skip or miss some of the key program questions. And so we want to make sure we're not only looking at social marketing. And we actually have a funny cartoon. Well, I think it's funny. I have a weird sense of humor. And it's this whole idea. Imagine you all, I know some of you have been in a meeting at some point in time, and then the questions come up, well, what's this big marketing campaign idea? And it could have been you, not pointing any fingers, but somebody said, we got this really good idea. We're going digital. We're going to do Facebook, YouTube. We're going to create a mobile app. We're going to do Pinterest. And then somebody in the room said, wow, that's awesome. But what are we going to do on those channels? And I'm pretty sure somebody said, well, we don't know. We'll figure that out later. But you were really excited about the channels you were doing. And so just recognizing that strategy is not the same thing as a tactic. So recognizing that you want to be in those spaces is not a strategy to be in those spaces. And strategy becomes very important based on this slide right here. So if anybody's never seen this slide before, or this picture or this image, we're really talking about the trans-theoretical model of change, that it really becomes important as we've all bought into this idea that as people make a decision to get better, to help themselves, to change their behavior, it's not linear. It may go backwards, it may go forwards, it may skip a step. And so we all recognize that that process itself is not linear. How we communicate to people should not be linear either. And so we need to be able to make adjustments. And as we make an adjustment, we need to be able to evaluate to understand if that worked so we can enhance what worked and stop doing what didn't work so we can help people along this process. Another chat box question, how many of you ever had to pitch an idea, a program, or some kind of event to leadership? And then if you have, what were some of the questions you had to answer in order to gain approval? Okay, what can we expect? Who are you trying to reach? What are you trying to get people to do? Expected outcomes, number anticipated to be served. If you think about this, they're really asking you to do an evaluation. And so before you even get approved through the program, you're being asked to evaluate the program. And oftentimes what happens is, unless the grant makes us do evaluation, we end up talking about or thinking about evaluation on the back end, when in reality, what we want to evaluate should be part of our original strategy as we decide in the beginning how to move forward. Now, recognize that most of us are no longer in year one, and we want to figure out how we're supposed to be evaluating social marketing. It's never too late. You just change your approach if you're not in the beginning stages, but just recognize that you've already started to have conversations with people about evaluation. You just weren't using the word evaluation. Another question for anybody who has kids, nieces, nephews, cousins, this whole idea or question that kind of came up was, would you ever give your child an allowance that was promised to them if they didn't complete their agreed upon chores? We don't even have to do the chat box for that one. Most of the answer is going to be no. And we recognize it should be the same way as we're having conversations with our funders. This whole idea, which the next session we're going to do is around sustainability. If we want to be sustainable, we want to have sustainable change, we have to have proof points to continuously ask for funding. And so to ensure that we're getting that funding, we have to have, whether it's proof points about who do we help, who do we serve, did we reach our expected outcomes, did they do what we were trying to get them to do, we have to evaluate those questions in order to ask for additional funding. And so I wanted to be able to kind of just look at a couple of slides just to really lay out the groundwork of why is evaluation even important in the first place. Now, some of this may be familiar to a lot of you all, and typically you have these questions, these conversations around the program. I want you to start thinking about the same questions and desire to do evaluation around your social marketing, because in theory, social marketing shouldn't be a standalone. It should be complementary to the program, and so you should be thinking about them at the same time. And so if you're going to evaluate the program, you should be evaluating the social marketing as well. Let's get into what does evaluation look like. When you think about your campaign, there's really, I would say, 5 key areas you should be monitoring. And if there's any evaluators on the phone call, I would ask that you have these conversations with your site as well, so you got to have conversations around these 5 areas. The first one is demographics. So we think about this whole idea that neighborhoods can change, whether you're talking about gentrification, immigration, development, or whatever. Your message shouldn't stay the same. You need to change that. And so if you've changed it, what changed? And you need to evaluate how people responded to that change. Consumer preferences. If you think about this whole idea that issues seen as crucial one day, they be invisible to the next. And so I joke in my house all the time. I actually remember having a pager. Now, granted, we're talking 15, 17 years later, but things change within the year. And so consumers are fickle. Around consumer products, they're also fickle with how they communicate with us, which dives directly into the next piece, which is the whole idea around trends and social conditions. So you want to make sure or ensure that you're not offering services or advocating behavior changes that have changed. Now, I know a lot of this sounds simple, but I know we get caught up oftentimes with trying to make sure the program is working or letting somebody else handle the social marketing that we forget some of the basic day-to-day aspects about trends, social memory, et cetera. And that's why I want to make sure we're calling out that you're monitoring this with your evaluation for the campaign. Brought up social memory. What was immediately important to one generation may be incidental to the next. And so this whole idea, when you talk, particularly when you talk about minority communities, first generation, second generation, the memory is not the same. And so you want to make sure when you're evaluating your campaign, particularly if you're looking at 16 to 24 age group, that's different from the 25 to 30, actually 25 to 40 age group, and then the baby boomers, which would be, I believe, like they're 65. Things have just changed, and what they remember has changed. So how you're communicating, you should evaluate to make sure they're actually taking that information in. And lastly, communication channels. You'll hear a little bit more about this when you get to Brian. A lot of us were raised on TV, and at some point we even switched over to the internet. But if you're trying to really communicate, you really should be using text messaging. And so if you're not using text messaging, I really want you to consider evaluating what you're using to look at the return on your investment. Are you getting inquiries based off of that? And just make sure what you're using is actually working from a communication channel standpoint. I want you to think back to your campaign, and are you actually able to answer the following questions? The first one is number of people that you attract to your services. The second one is number of people that you convince to adopt healthy or socially desirable practices. The third one is the amount of community support that you can assemble. And the last one is the amount of influence those people you're talking to are able to exert through their own advocacy efforts. And so if you're not able to answer these 4 right now, if you have an evaluation team, I would start having a conversation around these 4 questions, because even though you can change the wording, the crux or the basis of these 4 questions are what you should be asking and answering about reaching your customer bases. And then kind of taking to that, thinking about some of the same categories, there's your message. There's your market research. It will tell you if the people are getting and paying attention to your message. If not, you should be reframing it. Your services. Are your services effective? Are you meeting people's needs? And I'll let you be able to read through these, but just these 4, you should be able to, you should be communicating through to people, and your target market, you should be communicating them using your social marketing, and then these are the evaluation types of things you should be looking at. And if you find that you're getting unfavorable answers to these questions, you need to readdress them through the program, and then you'll be addressing them not only with the actions, but also how you communicate with them through the social marketing. And then after these, that's called process evaluation, which we won't get into for this conversation. But after you make that change, you evaluate it again. So again, if you have an evaluation team, you should be having this conversation with them about what to expect. And if you don't, I would be thinking through this to make it part of your strategy, particularly around communications. The first one is, how many inquiries for information did you receive? And if you notice, only one of these talks about social media, so it's not just about likes and retweets, but how many people actually engaged and asked you a question? Did you get an email? Did you get a phone call? If you had an event, did somebody stop you? Did you gather that information? How are you collecting it? The second question is, how many new followers did you gain on social media? It's great if you get 500 likes a day, but if those 500 likes come from the same 10 people, you're not really improving. So you need to be able to measure how many new people are hearing your message. The third one is, everything you do should be sending someone somewhere. And if you have a website, they should be sending them to your website. And so you want to be able to evaluate how many times did somebody visit that website. And then on top of that, not only did they show up, on what pages did they visit, but how long did they stay? If you're evaluating that, you can now figure out what types of things that they want to hear about, what they want to see about, and you can enhance that. If you know that they went to the landing page, stayed for 10 seconds, and didn't visit anything else, maybe it's time to change the landing page. If they went to your events page, but nobody clicked for more information, maybe your events page isn't robust enough. So that's the kind of things you want to be, that's why you want to be able to evaluate that. And then lastly, how many people are coming to your events? And more importantly, how they hear about it. If everything is word of mouth, but you're spending $50,000 on radio, your radio is not working. Or if you're spending no money on radio, but everybody just happens to walk by and word of mouth is not working, maybe it's time to look for some other ways to communicate. So that's just really the basic 4 outputs you should be looking to evaluate. Lastly, I wanted to talk about how do I want you to actually approach evaluation. And so whether you're doing with your evaluation team or you're trying to figure out how to do it on your own in-house, I want to give you a couple of tips to, at least as a starting point, or even if you're in that intermediate way to move forward. So the first one is surveys or intercepts. And we can probably get you guys some examples if you're not sure what an intercept is. The next one is consumer panels. Most of us are actually talking to a regular group of stakeholders, but instead of having like a one-time focus group, which is what most of us do, we talk to them or we have access to them on a very consistent basis. Let's go ahead and create a group, which will be called a consumer panel, and then get regular feedback sessions from them instead of doing it one time. That way you can start measuring over time the type of feedback that you're getting, and you can be more consistent in how you execute based off of that feedback. Can we go to the next slide? I also want you to look at how you're monitoring your overall efficiency. And so I want you to focus on 4 areas. The first one is your area of communication. And it's this really idea around if you're not seeing growth in inquiries, there's probably start having conversations that you might be in the wrong place. So if you're spending all your time on social media, but you're not getting any inquiries, then maybe social media, or specifically if you're on the wrong social media channel, it might be time to change. Or if you're doing everything word of mouth, but you're not getting people continue to ask for services or make inquiries about services, it might be time to move beyond word of mouth. Second, I want you to be evaluating the efficiency of your target population. What if you have the right message, but you're talking to the wrong person? So oftentimes we talk about going directly to the consumer. Well, maybe the message is not getting through, so we need to be talking to influencers of those consumers. Or it could be vice versa. So you want to make sure you're measuring that. The third one is really tied to number 1, which is the whole idea around communication channel. So it's not just measuring the channel of how you're talking to people. And then lastly, this idea around competition. And I want to ensure that you're analyzing your feedback to see if that you assume the correct information. So not only just getting the information, but analyzing it as well. So let me go to the next one, which is now would be time for us actually to introduce Ghost. So I've had an opportunity to kind of give you kind of these 3 key steps of why is it even important, and then being able to move into identifying the strategies and then give me some talking points to have with your team. Now I want to give you Ghost to give you an opportunity to walk you through a case study of this in action and what this looks like in real life.
Hi everyone, so this is Brian Barnes, and that's exactly right. Everything that Thomas has been talking about, we talk about in our Now is the Time community in Oklahoma. And so this is an opportunity where we want to share what we're doing, and we're hopeful beyond this webinar to reach out to other Now is the Time communities and talk about best practices. Let's talk about what's working and what's not working. So we have just finished year 3 of our engagement. We're just at the beginning of year 4. And I want to show you what we've done to date, and I'll go through it really quickly. And then I want to share the results that we've been tracking. Now I want to preface, we're tracking and what I'm presenting are results specifically associated with our social marketing. So guys, there are surveys about the experience, and we have consumer panels in the form of service provider monthly meetings that are outside of the evaluation components that I'm going to talk about today. That they do exist within our community. Again, this is just a closer look at the practices and findings that we've implemented in Oklahoma. And our background, this may be similar to your community, may not be, but in Oklahoma, suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death for young adults aged 16 to 25. Homicide is the 1st. And so the goals, before we even started year 1, the goals were, let's help young adults recognize these issues, let's connect those that have a need with services, and let's also work to decrease the stigma of shame associated with these issues in our community. And so we started with discussion. We started with research. And there were some great materials that were already provided, because I don't know about you all, but we didn't have like a huge research budget. We had to work with what we had. And there were some great resources made available to us through work and reports and white papers that have been published by SAMHSA, by NAMI. And then we also looked at some of our resources and our world of advertising and marketing, and we looked at Nielsen and common source media to get an idea of how our audiences really consume media. So we did do some qualitative research through an online survey, and we surveyed providers and young people from our 3 audit counties, and we combined the results of the survey, these takeaways, with our takeaways from existing research materials. And all of that was put together into a discovery document that we shared and we discussed, and we used that discussion to create our social marketing plan for years 1 and 2. So we reviewed existing research, we conducted an online survey with providers and young people, and then we got together, we talked about it. We discussed the findings and takeaways, and that's what we used to create our marketing plan. And during that discovery, and I know this might be a little bit small, we looked at both Nielsen and Common Source Media. Nielsen said, and both had surveys. Nielsen had 13 to 24. Common Source had 13 to 17. It wasn't our ideal age range, but it was really, really close, guys. And Nielsen said texting is the most preferred method for young adults aged 13 to 24. Common Source broke it down even more for 13 to 17-year-olds, and they said 68% of 13 to 17-year-olds prefer to text. 51% say social is up there with their fave. 30% email, 19% talk to each other with instant message, and 11% through online gaming, and it went down and down and down. Twitter was very low on the list. But for texting, 13 to 17-year-olds, an average of 3,417 messages per month. The next age range, 18 to 24, 1,914 messages texted per month. Text, text, text. All right, so year 1, it was about establishing that foundation and deciding that we wanted to tell a story and how to tell that story to start a conversation. And so we worked from that discussion to put together a concept of visual identity. We talked about a plan so that we had a digital presence, how we were going to talk, what our tone was going to be on our social media channels, and our website where we could house all of our resources and information for our audience to find. But we also had service providers that were very plugged in with the community and where they interacted with young adults in transition, our target audience. and there was an opportunity for a physical presence. And I just mean posters and printed collateral, your usual suspects, where they already interacted and had a presence physically in our counties. And then also media. We wanted to create some tools to help our local media affiliates. We wanted to make it easy for them to help spread the word about our initiative. And so our concept, visual identity, it was a logo mark, graphic standards, and our campaign messaging. We changed Oklahoma Now as the time. We changed our acronym to be represented as On It, Oklahoma Now is the time. And that helped to solve an issue where we had people pronouncing it, the same initiative, two different ways. And that was one of the things that we had to address that we discovered during that research. Let's get everyone talking about the same initiative and pronouncing it the same way. Colors and typography, we chose them with intention, and we wanted to use those consistently to help build equity in the initiative. And we found that anonymity was something that was important to our audience as they were deciding whether or not this affected them. And so we said, all right, well, whenever we use photography, let's only use photography whenever we have it with associated with a story where there's a positive outcome. If we're just talking about the statistics or how to identify, let's maybe not have that image of someone's actual peer. Let's maybe think about an illustrative way to do that. And we also created a slogan and hashtag, I wish you knew, that we promoted in materials. So guys, what we said is, in our area, the best way to find out if a young adult is experiencing these issues is to simply ask them. And so we wanted our materials to help prompt that question and to get that response. So I want to show, on it, we have our mark in the left-hand corner. Our color palette is the next column where we have licorice, white sugar, grape soda, limoncello, limeade, and berry bubblegum. Told you, we decided that we were not going to go black and white. We were not going to go dark, heavy colors. We were not going to present information in a sad, depressing way that perpetuated stigma. And then we had typefaces that were going to be used, again, all used consistently in our different channels so that they all reinforce and help to build equity. I wish you knew to prompt the question. Our contact info and how to direct them where we wanted them to go. And then a series of illustrations that I'll show how we used in our materials, where we do use those with statistics instead of an actual photo of someone that's experiencing maybe some of the negatives. And our digital presence, we wanted a site that engaged young adults and social content that pushed the initiative with consistent reach and frequency. Reach and frequency is something that I talk about all the time and over and over and over again. So we also designed everything digital with mobile devices in mind. It's where the majority of our traffic was going to come from. We estimated 60%. It was close. It wasn't quite 60%, but close. We also knew that we wanted to capture stories and include a self-evaluation quiz so that if we got someone to our site, it wasn't just bombarding them with information. We wanted to give them something useful to do. And so we had an approved quiz where they could answer some simple questions, and they were presented with a response that said, you maybe could benefit from talking to someone, or this looks fantastic and you seem wonderful. We also included an interactive map with all of our providers so that we could help our viewers connect with services. And we developed our social media content 2 months at a time. We did not have someone that was designated that could just stay day in and day out posting. We wrote our content 2 months at a time, and we scheduled it in advance so that we could set it and let it go. And our posts were really viewed as a replacement for traditional ads. We didn't have media dollars. We have social content. So we were and are most interested in measuring those social media channels for our reach and frequency. So our digital presence, I'll share with you guys in the chat if you want to go check it out yourself. Our website is oknowisthetime.org. I'm putting that in the chat window right now. Our website is designed so it's responsive. It looks great on any size screen, and it includes that yellow bar at the top, which if you'll click it, it takes you to an interactive map of providers across our state, not just our 3 counties, across the entire state. We have a series of video stories of young adults and service providers to help show young adults who may be experiencing mental health or substance abuse issues what it would be like to reach out, what that end result might look like for them. We wanted to make it as approachable and non-judgmental as absolutely possible. You'll also see, if you go on that site, you'll see the self-evaluation quiz, and I would suggest that you go ahead and take it for yourself just to see how it worked. And again, our social posts scheduled in advance. Fiscal Presence. We have printed collateral, those posters and brochures, and we also created a toolkit for media outlets that included a press release and visual assets. We wanted to make it as easy as possible for a media affiliate. If we could get some interest, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for them to run with our stories. But a series of posters, brochure, and press release. And our poster series broke down the signs to look for in the categories of emotional, psychological, behavioral, physical, and psychosis. And in a follow-up, we've offered to share the materials that we've done in Oklahoma, because we want you to see what we've done, and we want to see how it compares to what you've done and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And we did one series that suggested what could be a pretty common experience, or the way that a young adult might experience one of these issues, to ask them to think about it. And then we paired that with a statistic, again, from great research that existed for Oklahoma specifically. We were able to tie a stat to each of these areas to help communicate how prevalent this issue is. What you don't see black and white photos of kids in tears or in corners or depressed and sad. We want to present information straightforward, without sugarcoating it, and also without judgment. And so that's why you see those illustrated elements. You see our colors. You do not see the hallmarks of this is a bad issue and we want you to feel bad about it. In addition, we had a brochure that were distributed along with areas of the location that included the signs to look for. All of this information is also on our site. And we wanted to drive them to, we've got a phone number, we've got our website, and we've got links to our social media channels as well. So it's just framing this issue with our young adults in mind. Again, we wanted to make it easy for media outlets to help spread the word, so we wrote press releases, created them as templates for our service providers, and provided visual assets so they could pass them along to their local media affiliates. And so this is just an example of the press release itself and some of the visual assets that we included. That was year one, the foundation. In year two, we wanted to produce a series of web videos where this time we got to bring in our actual stories. We wanted to capture stories of success in each of the counties. And so we have a total of 3 stories for each of our 3 counties for a series of 9 videos, guys, that are really great. And our young adults were so brave and so honest about sharing their story and their experience and how they got on the other side. And our service providers were wonderful and warm and talked about their experience. So it was just an incredible, incredible experience. So we captured and created a series of videos. We also successfully integrated a texting platform into our campaign. I don't know about each of your communities, but here we have some serious compliance issues that really limit what we can and can't do. One of the big hurdles, one of the big barriers to a texting platform here, where we could never capture an individual's phone number. And every texting platform that's out there, that's exactly what it's designed to do. So we had to find a provider that would scramble the numbers for us so that we never had an individual's actual cell phone number, so we couldn't identify them. And we wanted to continue documenting and sharing content on our channels. So that was year 2. In terms of the texting platform, I would like to ask, in our On It videos, all of these are on oknowisthetime.org. We have a series of 9. Please, oh please, check them out. And guys, you're not going to hurt my feelings. If you want to stop me, if you want to add something or ask a question, just go right ahead. Our texting platform, I would like to ask each of you that's in attendance, if you happen to have your smart device with you, text I wish to 55155 and you'll see exactly how we programmed it. We programmed an autoresponder to reassure our individuals that help is available, and it directs them directly to our website and also includes phone numbers to call for help. We were not allowed, ideally what we wanted to do with the texting platform is to have a service provider on the other end that could engage right when one of our target audience reached out. currently we are not able to do that. So the autoresponder was our compromise. That's what we had to do. But I want to stress, and I'll share some of the results of this, I want to stress, to be effective marketers, we must be able to meet our audience where they want us to. And then year 3, so the year that we just concluded, or the year that we just wrapped up, we want to encourage broadening this conversation by asking people in our communities to share their truth. There, I wish you knew. And to do that, we created a series of community chalkboards. And we went to our counties, and we talked to our service providers, and we did installation videos on how to install these in different locations. But we said, let's just ask people to, in an anonymous way, share their story, their experience with mental health or substance abuse. And we cautioned, we told the service providers, guys, expletives happen. It's a chalkboard, so you're going to have someone that's able to monitor this and to wipe away. If we do get an expletive or we get something that's inappropriate, we have to be able to erase it. But when the chalkboard fills up, we want our service providers to photograph it and document it. That is gold for social media content. And once it's filled up, we want them to erase it and start over again, so that we can get as many of these anonymous confessions or stories as possible. To that end, we worked with our service providers and created the chalkboard kit, and we actually created and packaged kits that we sent to our service providers along with these instructions on how to make their chalkboard wall. And so that's the year 3. We finally got our community chalkboard kits are starting to go up, and we're starting to capture them, and they are amazing. They're everything that we hope for, and I cannot wait to capture and share what we get. But as we look at measuring results, digital tactics, and especially social media, what's cool is they're developed with metrics built right in so that we can track engagement. On our website, we get to include Google Analytics, which is free and allows us to create real-time reports. Our social media dashboards, they help us track and reach and identify trends. Our texting metrics, they are currently limited by HIPAA, but we are because of that, we're only able to track number of texts only, but we can still track something. And of course, in Oklahoma, the metric we're ultimately hopeful for, like the one that I think truly counts, it's at the end of this, is looking for a reduction in the number of suicides in our awning counties. All right, but the metrics that we report year in, we've got Google Analytics, we've got our social engagement, and we've got our number of texts. So Google Analytics, guys, again, free. If you have a website, you can add Google Analytics into your existing site. We said 60% were going to come in off mobile devices. Well, we were a little bit off. It was 45%. That's still almost half coming on mobile devices. 55% were coming in on desktop. Our new visitor traffic, 80% of visitors to our site are new visitors. We have 23.44% that are returning. So this is, we had a soft launch in April, an official launch in June of 2016. So June of 2016 through May 31st of 2017, 2,713 sessions, 5,357 page views, 2 pages per session. On average, our viewers stayed on our site for 2 minutes, 2,076 unique users, and we have a 63% bounce rate. But I don't want to count the bounce rate as a negative. Bounce rate just refers to someone that goes to your site and they just stay on one page and then leave. Well, if they go to our home site and they find the provider that's nearest them, or they watch a video, or they take the self-evaluation quiz, and that's all they needed, and then they bounced, I still don't count that as a negative. But just to let you know, 63%, they came to, whether it was the home page or any other page, they looked at one page and then left. Social engagement. So guys, I do have some numbers to show. We don't have the final numbers for this fiscal year, but I wanted to share on average, we have 725 that we reach on Facebook per post, 653 per average reach per tweet. From April through December, or I'm sorry, from June of 2016 through December 31st of 2016. We reached 19,043 people with our Facebook posts, 9,331 on our Twitter feed. Our highest engagement we saw this year, and it's whenever we posted the first photographs of our community chalkboard that was filled out. 2,187 from that post, and that was not promoted. This year we will promote, and I expect those numbers to grow astronomically. And then texting. Guys, I fought really hard for this. All of the research shows texting is where this audience wants to be engaged. So we had a total text in, total people that use this, 1,172. But on our monthly activity, you can see it spiked right after we launched, and then it cratered. It flatlined. Well, I don't think that the research is wrong. I do think that this audience wants to be engaged on text. But I think what happened here, and this is my opinion, I don't have evidence to back it up, but I believe that the experience that they wanted was two-way texting, not an autoresponder. That's why. And so I'm sad to say that one of the components that we fought the hardest for, the way that we're able to currently use it, did not work. And so the texting platform will not be a part of year 4 moving forward. But I want to stress again, if we want to be effective marketers, we've got to figure this part out. We've got to figure out how to reach our audience where they want to be engaged. And guys, in a nutshell, that's what we've done in Oklahoma, where we have an incredible project director, we've got an incredible youth specialist, and we've got amazing service providers.
Actually, I do have one question, Brian. I love what you presented, and one of the things that I would love if you could maybe expand on is the whole idea around text messaging, because it got me to thinking, and I was wondering if you could maybe talk through or share what you saw maybe as the best piece about using the text messaging.
It was a hard-fought tactic to get it included, and whenever we launched and we saw those first couple of months where the numbers spiked, I was already patting myself on the back and congratulating all of us that we were so brilliant. And then to see it plummet was just sickening. We had to own it. We had to look at those numbers. So like I say, I know that the research is good, and I saw where there was engagement, and really organically it was growing, and then all of a sudden, it's just, you have to face, whenever numbers don't lie, numbers don't have emotion, and whenever we saw those numbers go down, we had to report it, and we had to talk about it. But I just have to believe that we had, with that early engagement, that was viable, that was the way to go. That not having that two-way conversation, that two-way component, the fact that it was an autoresponder was very quickly viewed and dismissed as disingenuous, or at the very least, not what I wanted. Or else we would have seen those numbers continue to grow.
The team on the phone, a question based off of that. So let's say that you all had hired Ghost, all of the sites had hired Ghost, and everyone had done text messaging, and you got the same answer. As let's say you were done the evaluation work, and we all gave you the same exact answer, which was saw a great spike, and then you saw a flat line because potentially there was nobody on the end doing two-way messaging. What are some of the kinds of questions you guys asked based off of that evaluation to maybe change how you move forward with text messaging? What are the kinds of questions you would ask in order to help you change your process of using text messaging moving forward?
And this is self-serving, but I want to ask, I know that, so not in Oklahoma, but we know that there are other initiatives, they are able to have this two-way engagement, and I want to know how. Why either compliance or restrictions are different for them than they are for us.
And I may have an answer for that. I'm going to tie it into, looks like Julie Murray had a comment about how they're using text messaging. So Julie was basically saying that, if I'm reading this correct, Julie, it looks like you were using two-way communication, but your clientele is about 60 people, so it's not too overwhelming. But on top of that, you're using it as a form of social marketing and not necessarily as a way for polling or sole way of communications, i.e. you're using it to inform people about events, etc. And so one of the things that I would say as the next steps, if you will, is you honestly have to look at your budgetary constraints. Can you hire a person to be there live as your two-way communicator? Or can you create or add, I hate to say this, add responsibilities to 2 or more people that currently work with you, and that's their role? if the answer is no, then if you remember, one thing we talked about is when you're evaluating things like drop-off, you're evaluating new or increased participants. And so if you can't do two-way, one of the things that you should be looking to adjust is content information that you're sending. So the way Julie is using it as events, I would recommend that if you guys haven't tried it, typically when you send a text message, you can also add a link at the bottom. You can also do A/B testing, so maybe one group gets one message, another group another message. And so increase the content that you're sending, recognize that you can't get two-way back, but now you're giving them more information to read, and you're always linking them back to something, whether it's your Instagram page, your website, or whatever. And then you can also test which communication they're responding to. Is it they're responding to an event more? Are they responding to a new hint on how to handle some type of mental health concern? And then you can kind of use that consistent communication as a quote-unquote form of two-way communication. I'm going to read this. She's thinking that Oklahoma was reluctant to use testing due to HIPAA, and her question is, she's wondering if other states have been implement any kind of warm or hot response. If so, how did you do that with HIPAA limitations? And then I'll throw in two more pieces since we're just on the text messaging conversation. And I don't want anyone to feel like this. We have to talk about text messaging, but since we're on it, I'll add two more pieces. The law changed, I want to say, about 10 years ago or so. And in theory, text messaging is a form where you really shouldn't be reaching out with quote-unquote promotional information. And the information that we're giving out is promotional information. And so we want to make sure it's not unsolicited. So if you're thinking about your overall plan, your overall social marketing plan, a component of that should be collecting emails and phone numbers. And if you're collecting it, it's no longer unsolicited. And so you have the opportunity to, when you're using text messaging, you're within the confines of the law. The other thing that I would say is when you're talking about how to communicate, HIPAA, as long as you're talking, particularly using data, high-level data, not low-level, individual-level data, it allows you to kind of get around this is, I think, when you start combining your knowledge of the program with your knowledge of social marketing, the same rules apply with social marketing that you would use for sharing data with the program. And so as long as you follow the same rules, you'll be fine within social marketing. Looks like there was probably a question around frequency of evaluation. And I will probably look at it from a standpoint of where you are in your process. If you're in your 4th year, you will probably just want to do an outcome evaluation to be able to say, these are our results. If you're in year 2 or 3 and you know you want to potentially make a change for the following year, or if part of your social marketing is very interactive and you have the ability to make a change at the 6-month time frame, then you would do a process evaluation, which would allow you to basically change how you're communicating. And then that's something you could do at the 6-month mark to make sure the last 6 months is different. Or you can do it at the end of the year so your next year is different. It kind of really depends on where you are in your process. Would you only be looking at outcomes, or would you be looking at process as well? Any more questions from the team?
If you can share any experience on once you've put together and conglomerated your data so you have outcomes and some form of evaluation, about what you do next and how you sort of evaluate who to show that evaluation to, the communities, the members, to funders. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. You want to go first, Brian, and I can tag on?
Oh, yeah, I can speak to it on our side. On our side, like I say, we meet every month. We have service monthly provider meetings where we get to share kind of what's going on, and we get to share successes and challenges. But at the end of each year, we do a wrap-up and we do reporting before we plan the following year's scope. And so at the beginning is whenever we really talk about we can pivot at any time that we want. But that's where we really plan and talk about how and where we're going to make changes if we need to. Formal reporting is done annually.
I'll tag on in terms of who needs to see it. And so it really depends on, basically everybody needs to see it, but for different reasons. And so I would make, you could almost literally make a one-pager which would highlight charts of improvements, decreases, basically all the key information that you want to see. And that really should be based off of that first conversation you had 12 months ago, 6 months ago, which says what are we trying to achieve, which is who we're trying to reach, what we're trying to get them to change, are we trying to get them to come to events or whatever. So whatever questions you create in the beginning, those are the results that you want to be able to show. If the answer is 0, then that's, I guarantee you somebody's going to ask a question about that. But what you don't, you essentially want to be able to answer the questions that as a team you guys assign at the very beginning of the process. And so now if those questions are around results that you want to ask for funding, then funders need to see that. If you saw some results that clearly say, you know what, we could make a bigger improvement, but the policy needs to change. Well, then probably somebody in city council, mayor's office, state's office needs to see that. If it's something that shows improvement and you want to get the community more involved, well, most of you probably have like a now is the time community team where you're bringing other providers and community members in on a monthly or quarterly basis to have conversations. That's when you would show them that data. And so everybody sees it, it just looks different, but at a minimum you should be answering and showcasing the answers to those original questions you created and then formatting the charts and verbiage depending on the audience. But everybody needs to see it.
That's very helpful information, Thomas, especially as grantees think about current stakeholders and how to really show the case for what's working or what's not working and how to have those conversations. Do folks have any feedback or comments or experiences with that next step?
I would want to say in terms of next steps and how you show it, I would do one of two ways. The first thing is get your evaluation team to do the long version report. Like you're going to need it. SAMHSA, somebody's going to need it, so go ahead and do it. On the flip side, everybody's busy. You're probably going to get 15, no matter how long the meetings are signed for, this one included, you're probably only going to get 15 minutes of focused attention. And so you want to be able to use those infographics, those graphs, those quick 2 or 3 sentence summaries to showcase what the images are trying to say, and then create a one, maximum 2 pages to highlight, to showcase the highlights of that longer report. And so that 1 or 2 pages is what you can, and when I say 2 pages, I really mean 1 page front and back. And so you can hand that out, email that to anybody, or if you're in a meeting, have a conversation, and then if somebody says, hey, I want more, you have the longer report. But you're going to have to do the long one anyway, so let somebody do it. But what you really need to spend your time developing is that short 1-pager or 2-page front and back that you can basically have on you at all times to be able to have conversations with people about the program. The other thing I would say about that is it's okay to fail. Like people always say all press is good press, so bad press is really good press too. But bad numbers are good also. If you originally set out to see or to show that you're going to be able to make X improvement, and after a 1-year evaluation, you didn't meet that and you weren't even close, well, that's important. It's more important to say you didn't meet it so you can change, so you're not spending 5 years doing the same thing and not helping anybody. And people will appreciate the fact that you said, we thought we were going to do X, we ended up 30 percentage points lower, but now our recommendation is to change and go this way. So numbers are good. Numbers work, whether they're good or bad, you just have to show them.
I just want to second what Thomas just said. Like I say, it wasn't a fun day to report the numbers where we showed the spike and then the dramatic decline in texting. But what would have been much worse is to have sat on that and then at the end of a 2 or 3 year period to have shown and had not addressed it or made a change or somehow correct. So like I say, that's true. You experiment, you try, some things work, some things don't.
Because remember, the social marketing is supposed to augment the program. And so through your social marketing, you can show what did or didn't work. You can now have conversations around changing the program, and that might be you need more funding for an FTE. You might need to change Wednesdays to Fridays. But if you're not having that conversation, honestly, it starts with the people you're talking to, and the best way to reach them is through your social marketing campaign. You have to do the work, and you have to evaluate the work so you can turn around, and once they work, really talk about the social marketing so you can change the program.
Even if you have bad numbers but have a recommendation attached to those quote-unquote bad numbers, how that really can show the community that A, you're listening, but B, we have a plan from these bad numbers, how we can improve them or change the course of action so we can reach folks in different ways. So that trial and error, whether it goes bad or good, is always has a learning lesson attached to it and a call to action from that. And I'm wondering if folks on the line or who are engaging through chat have any resources that they want to share or that they want to showcase that you or one of your partner agencies has that you feel is a good example, or maybe not a good example, but you want to share it. This can be a time for some peer exchange and peer learning amongst each other. All right, Julie shared that you use email, text, snail mail, I love it, and Snapchat.
And I want to throw in one piece of information for Julie. If she's doing email, texting, Snapchat, and snail mail, then they're doing something in Maryland that I would encourage all of you to do is collect the information. You can't evaluate it if you're not reaching them. You won't reach them if you're not collecting how to reach them. So every time you have a meeting, every time you're in a community, a friend of a friend, like you should be collecting the username. You should be collecting their cell phone number. Even if it's going to change once every 3 months, still collect it anyway, because you can't reach them through these different channels if you don't have a way to reach them. And then also, we talked a little bit about testing. So maybe one group gets one thing, another group gets another. You can test who clicks the most based on the messaging. If you don't have their number, their email, or their username, you can't test. So the one key piece about Julie and Maryland's success is they're collecting that channel to reach them, the number, the email, or whatever, so you can communicate, so you can evaluate. I'm about to trademark that, CCE, collect, communicate, evaluate.
I wonder too, Thomas, you got me thinking, and I wonder how to get something, to download a PDF or to enter an art contest, an online art contest. You often first have to enter your phone number or your email. So I wonder how folks are thinking outside the box as far as that initial engagement. Like, why should I, as a youth, young adult, give you my email? Why should I give you my cell phone? This is all like potentially very personal contact information. So what's the win-win situation? What are they going to get in return for giving their contact information?
One of the things that we tell everybody is, everybody's used to hearing, nothing in life is free. So we'll give you whatever you want, but you have to give us something in return. So you don't get a promotional item, you don't get this downloaded PDF, you don't get this free song unless you get something. And the something we typically want is an email, a way to contact you, or for you to post something on your social media site. And then there's that whole ability for you to give them the communications, but also still be able to collect something from them as well.
It's different than our Now is the Time initiative, but for many of our other clients in different sectors, that's the goal of a lot of our tactics. It's simply to capture that information. You guys, solid email addresses that are vetted are gold.
And particularly with your age group, I literally have the conversation often with transition age youth, and they'll say, well, how is it that Apple can do such and such, or how is they can upgrade and download without me asking? And I was like, I guarantee you when you first bought that phone, you didn't read the 3 pages of text, you just clicked I accept. Well, that age group is so quick to get to what they want, they'll click accept. And it'll take them a while to opt out, but you'll get the first accept. Being able to collect the information from them is pretty easy to get it. Now, then it's up to you to give them content so they don't opt out later. But that first, give me your email or whatever, just to get whatever the download is, you can get that. You just have to create the system. And then guess what? You can evaluate that. Brian, if you have time, can you talk a little bit more about that process-wise? I know oftentimes our Now at the Time team members are crunched when it comes to dollars for social marketing. Can you talk about process, not from a money standpoint, but from a resource and time standpoint, how difficult, if it's difficult at all, to set up those systems to be able to collect data from our youth?
That's a layered question. Depending on what your end goal is, different ways to support whatever your end goal is. Difficult to put it in the context for Now Is the Time specifically, just because I'm so wired or conditioned now to not collect that individual data. And so that's why for us, it's just that frequency and reach. Those are some of our key metrics, because I can't capture their individual email address. I can't capture their individual phone number. But with other clients, for instance, our county health department, we've developed an app that we're getting ready to launch whose sole purpose is to help build their database, where, just like you say, the app is free, but you're going to opt in as soon as you download it.
I wonder, Brian and Thomas, if you compartmentalize these different audiences and emails. Like, for example, you have your email listserv, and then you have your Snapchat usernames and audience, and you have your Facebook users and audiences. And do you find that there's a lot of crossover with people across these mediums, or do you really market and promote resources, services, what have you, to each of these individual platforms and the audience relative to that platform?
If you don't mind, I want to take that one for Oklahoma. There is a lot of crossover. In fact, the one social media channel where I would say is the exception is Twitter. Twitter, and our research shows that that's not a viable channel for our target audience, our young adult, but for their family or for their caregiver and their service provider, it is. So, like I say, so that's one outlier, but other than that, there's quite a bit of crossover. And so we do have messages that are tailored for our young adult, messages that are tailored for their primary caregiver or parent, and messages that are more community or broader based. But really, it's those three audiences in that order, and a lot of overlap in all of the channels.
I wonder, too, just to layer on top of that, maybe to differentiate between, let's say on Facebook you have maybe two audiences. You have the youth and young adults, and you also have the families. Are you then sending out two different, like the same message, but in different lingo, if you will, to the parents or caregivers, and then also to the youth?
The answer to the first part is they're all for consumption by all audiences on our channels. So the way that we differentiate it is if we're speaking to a young adult, it really is trying to either share that pure story or suggest a scenario which they may find themselves in that is common, as opposed to if we're speaking to their caregiver or parent or family or influencer, that's where we go to more of the statistic-based. So it's a statistic-based message instead of a situation-based message. But again, all messages are intended for consumption by those audiences. We just have the audience in mind. We're not able to separate that in terms, I mean, all we can say is we can compare the post that was intended for our young adult and the post that was intended for our influencer. These are the results for both.
Thank you so much, Brian and Thomas, for your expertise and all of the wonderful discussion. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join. And take care, everyone.